Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Okay, today I'm going to continue talking about the topic from the last lecture. In the last lecture, if I remember correctly, I was talking about information to the police or police report, as we call it. It was under section 107 of the CPC. All the rules and regulations, procedures regarding a police report. So, the next issue. What do the police do once a police report has been made? Information has been given to the police. The police take it down in the form of a police report, as we normally call it. And the person who lodged the report are usually called the complainant. The complainant because he or she made a complaint to the police. By giving information to the police is actually making a complaint to the police about some offense being committed, either against him or against any other person. So what do the police do next? So the process that the police normally do is what we call police investigations. So the next topic I'm talking about is police investigations. What do the police do during their investigation? And what are the powers given to the police in police investigations? As you all know, our nation, our country, we have the constitution, and one part of the constitutions are regarding personal liberties. And personal liberties concern personal liberty, personal liberties, and also rights to freedom, right to property, and right to whatever that's contained in Article 5. And all these rights can only be taken by way safe in accordance of the law, meaning that if there is a provisions of the law that allows for all these rights to be infringed, you might call it, so there must be provisions under the law for the police to do certain things investigating into an offense that would infringe upon the basic rights of an individual or a citizen of this country. So what are the things that the police can do during police investigations? So we begin with sections 108 of the CPC. As you all know, last week we are talking about complaint to the police or police report or information to the police, which is governed under section 107, which provides for the rules and procedures regarding a police report. So the action taken by the police will be under section 108. So what type of action will the police take? It depends on the report itself. What do the reports reveal? What do the complaint to the police will reveal? So the complaint will reveal it will either reveal an offense has been committed or suspected to be committed, the possibility of an offense being committed, offense under the law, or it could be that it doesn't disclose any offense at all. And even if there is an offense being disclosed, offense or offenses, these offenses can be seizable offenses or non-seizable offenses. I think by now you all should know already what are seizable offenses, what are non-seizable offenses. As a rule of thumb, as a general rule, offenses that carries a punishment of 3 years imprisonment are considered to be seizable offenses, and below that will be a non-seizable offenses, unless the law itself provides that the offense will be a seizable offense, even though the punishment is below 3 years. Okay, under section 108 of the CPC, 1081, it says that when information aforesaid relates to the commission of a non-seizable offence, that official shall refer the informant to a magistrate. A non-seizable offence shall refer to a magistrate. This is what we usually call an RTM. Dia buat minit, dia tulis kat situ RTM. RTM means refer to magistrate for non-seizable offences. Okay, my cat is coming to disturb me, so you have to ignore dia, sebab dia ni kadang-kadang memang suka datang kacau I. So this time around dia just nak pergi tidur kat belakang tu, so let it be. Now, under subsection 1 of 108, non-seizable offence, one of the things the police can do, refer the matter to the magistrate, refer to magistrate. Now, under 1082, the other thing, the police may also exercise its powers under the CPC or its powers under the law to conduct an investigation. But to do so, he has to obtain what we call an OTI, order to investigate. 1082 provides that no police officer shall, in a non-seizable case, exercise any of the special powers in relation to police investigation by this chapter without the order of the public prosecutor. So the powers of the public prosecutor are usually carried out by the deputy, the deputy public prosecutor. So what the police will do when the offence is one of non-seizable by nature, will refer the matter to, will go and see a deputy public prosecutor, DPP, and obtain an OTI, order to investigate. Now, subsection 3 says that any police officer not below the rank of sergeant or any officer in charge of police station receiving such order may exercise the same powers in respect of investigation except the power to arrest without warrant as a police officer may exercise without an order seizable case. So once they obtain the OTI, he can do all the powers that the police can do in the police investigation, except to arrest. Why? Because to arrest you need a warrant. For non-seizable offences, a warrant of arrest is needed to arrest. Now, what happened in a seizable case? In a seizable case as provided for under section 109, any police officer not below the rank of sergeant or any officer in charge of police station may, without the order of the public prosecutor, exercise all any of the special powers in relation to police investigation given by this chapter in any seizable case. Okay, first thing to note that it says that an officer of the rank of sergeant and above. This cat behind me is quite distracting actually, but try to ignore it as much as you can. The powers must be exercised by an officer of the rank of sergeant and above. Or an officer in charge of police station. So corporal ke, constable ke, tak boleh lah. But there is a proviso there. The proviso is more important. Section 1092, kecualian dia. No proceeding of book is not a kecualian actually, but this is for practical purposes. It says that no proceeding of a police officer any such case shall be any stage be called in question on the ground that the case was one in which the officer was not empowered under this section to exercise. So maksud dia, pada peringkat itu, at that stage, when the powers to investigate was actually exercised by an officer who is not of the rank of a sergeant and above, and not an officer of in charge of a police officer, a police station, it cannot be questioned at that stage. So I give you an example. Let's say satu laporan diterima sama ada melalui telefon or somebody came to the police station, make a report of an offence in progress. Satu kes rompakan sedang berlaku. Satu kes kecurian sedang berlaku. satu kes pecah rumah sedang berlaku. So the balai immediately dispatch a patrol car to go to the scene of the crime, or where the offence is said to have been committed or being committed. In the patrol car, there's only a corporal and a constable. So when the patrol car arrives and the corporal and constable came out to find out what's going on, nobody can question at that time saying, oh, tak boleh, you're not sergeant and above. So because of that, you cannot investigate this case. No, there's no such thing. You cannot question it at that time. Because the issue regarding sergeant and above will only arises later on when come to issues like recording statement, taking down of exhibits. But immediate response, it cannot be questioned at that time. Even then, at the police station itself, when information has been received, a complaint has been made, the officer, the sergeant or officer in charge of police station either can take action himself or deputize the powers to officers below the rank of sergeant to do certain things, as in section 112. Imagine the example that I've given just now, responding to an offence in progress. So what can the police do is provided for under section 110. Let's look at section 110. This is the procedure where a seizable offence been committed. If from the information received or otherwise, a police officer not below the rank of a sergeant or officer in charge of police station has reason to suspect the commission of a seizable offence, he shall, unless the offence is of a character which the public prosecutor has directed need not be reported to him, immediately send a report of the same to the public prosecutor, and shall proceed in person or shall depute one of his subordinates. Officers to proceed to the spot to inquire into the facts and circumstances of the case and to take such measures as may be necessary for the discovery, and where not expedient, arrest of the offender. So what does it mean? It means this. Information has been received. Information is regarding the commission of a non-seizable offence. So what do the officer in charge of the police station do? So 1. If the case is of the type where the deputy public prosecutor, who is carrying out the powers of public prosecutor, have directed that it must be reported to him, then he has to report first to the police. He has to make a report to the deputy public prosecutor. If there is no direction that he has to report to the public prosecutor, then he need not have to go and report. But in both cases, he has to immediately proceed either in person or assign an officer below him to the place where the commission of the offence said to be going on, to inquire into the facts and circumstances, to investigate lah tu, to inquire into the facts and circumstances, to make inquiries, and to make discovery, take measures for discovery. There is discovery of the offences and exhibits and barang case and all things like that, find witnesses. And when not expedient, that means if necessary, kalau boleh, pada bahasa, arrest the offender. So kalau there's an offence in progress, polis dapat maklumat, terus beritahu dengan dia punya subordinate dia terus pergi tempat kejadian. Kalau boleh tangkap, ada lagi pesalah tu di situ, tangkap. Kalau tidak pun, selain pada itu, kalau tidak tangkap pun, make inquiries. Tanya. Find out the facts and circumstances. Tanya apa yang berlaku sebenarnya di sini. So get the information and ambil tindakan yang perlu. Proviso. Provided when any information as to the commission of any such offence is given against any person by name and the case is not of a serious nature, or the police officer receiving the same need not proceed in person or depute a subordinate officer to make inquiry on the spot. And B, if it appears to the police officer giving information there was no sufficient ground for proceeding or further proceeding in a matter, he shall not do so. So dalam keadaan-keadaan yang mana dia tak payah untuk pergi ke tempat kejadian, it's not necessary for him to actually go to the scene where the incident is happening there and then on the spot. First, when the nature of the offence itself does not require him to go to the place, or if not of serious nature. So what can be the cases where it does not require you to actually proceed to the scene of crime? For example, I given example just now, like cases like ada kejadian gaduh ke, ada kejadian pembunuhan ke, ada kejadian pecah rumah ke, ada kejadian mencuri ke. You have to go to the scene, find out what's going on, make arrest necessary. Itu dalam keadaan satu keadaan. Tapi ada juga case-case yang does not require you to proceed immediately to the scene. Case yang berbentuk macam commercial in nature. Ada orang kata dia kena tipu, ada orang kata dia kena scam, ada orang kata duit dalam bank account dia dikeluarkan oleh orang yang tidak ketahui, and things like that. I'm sorry, I need to answer this call sekejap. Hello. Waalaikumsalam. Ya, saya. Mhm. 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 Okey. Aha. Saya rasa saya bayar terus. Ha. Macam mana tu? Tak boleh transfer dalam akaun. Saya pakai bank Islam. Okey, tak apalah, nanti saya pergi dekatnya. Ada. Ha. Okey. Okey. Berapa jumlah? Okey, alright. Sama. Okay, sorry about that. The bank call. So where was I just now? Okey, contoh kejadian-kejadian yang tidak memerlukan dia untuk proceed terus ke tempat kejadian. Kes-kes komersial, kes rasuah. I think you get the idea lah. Why it's not necessary for the police to go there. So what do the police do? Siasat kemudian lah. They will take action later. Siasat kemudian yang tak memerlukan dia untuk pergi ke tempat kejadian. And then there are also cases yang not really of serious nature, nak memerlukan dia untuk pergi ke tempat kejadian pada masa itu sahaja. You know now there's so many type of police report being made by all sort of people, not all require the police to immediately investigate. And then there is a situation where it appears that the police officer receiving information there is no sufficient ground for proceeding, tidak ada sebab untuk ambil tindakan. Keadaan yang mana where a report has been made, the cat is sleeping. A report that has been made but it does not disclose any offence. Ini pun banyak contoh kita boleh tengok dekat social media ke, dekat akhbar ke, dekat mana-mana hari ini. All sort of people actually going to the police and making all sort of report. Dia baca-baca something dalam surat khabar, dia tak happy, dia pergi buat police report. Dia tengok something, dia terbaca something over the social media, is not too happy with it, dia pergi buat police report. And the police has to decide whether to proceed to investigate or not. And the police can decide not to proceed to investigate, tetapi the police has to give their reasons as in subsection 2 and subsection 3 of section 110. Section 110, there is subsection 1, 2 and subsection 3. In each of these cases mentioned, paragraph A and B, the police officer receiving information shall state in his said report, if any, his reasons for not complying with subsection 1 and 3, where the police officer exercises the power of deputation given by subsection 1, the subordinate officer so deputed shall not be entitled to use any powers given by subsection 111, 112, 116 and 117. Okay, what does it mean? The first one, subsection 2, it just means if the police did not proceed immediately or the police did not decide not to investigate because it does not disclose any offense, the police has to give their reasons. By the police here, I mean the officers receiving information, the officer in charge of the balai have to give their reasons. And in the situation that I give the example just now under 1101, where the officer in charge of the police station immediately send a subordinate to go and find out what happened, to find out about the facts and circumstances, and to make inquiries and make discoveries and inquiries at the scene of the crime. If the officer is below the rank of sergeant and above, he cannot exercise the powers of section 111, 112, 116, and 117. So what are the powers under this section? This is a topic that I'm going to talk about today. Section 111. Maksud di section ni, kalau yang pergi itu adalah pegawai bawahan, anggota korporal ataupun anggota biasa, dia boleh pergi tapi tidak boleh membuat apa-apa tindakan di bawah section ini. Okay, section 111. Kita mula dengan section 111. Section 111 says that a police officer making investigation under this chapter may order in writing requiring the attendance before him or any other person for whom the information given or otherwise appears to be acquainted with the circumstances or the facts of the case, and that person shall attend as so required. Apa maksud dia? You see, pertamanya dia kata kat sini, a police officer making an investigation into the offence. Di balai polis, there are designated investigating officers. There is an officer in charge of balai polis. Dulu-dulu sergeant, now usually chief inspector and above, could be an ASP, ACP, depending on the size of the police station. That officer can, the ranking will commensurate with the size of the balai police. And then under him there will be investigating officers, usually inspector and above. Investigating officers who will take turns to be on duty. Once a report comes, the case will be referred to the investigating officer, and the investigating officer will take up that case and begin an investigation. So generally, the investigating officer in making an investigation may require the attendance of persons acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case. Dalam lain perkataan, witnesses lah. They may require witnesses to come forward and give statements to him. Statements is under section 112. So dia akan keluarkan perintah di bawah section 111 requiring certain people yang acquainted with the circumstances of the case to come and see him, for him to record a statement under section 112. We'll talk about section 112 lagi after this. But this is a power for the police to require a person to come forward and beri kerjasama. These are person yang acquainted with the circumstances of the case. Who are the person acquainted with the circumstances of the case? Witness lah, saksi lah. So saksi could be yang menyaksikan kejadian. Accident happens, a person happens to be at the scene and saw how the accident happened. This evidence is important. Apa yang disaksikan tu penting. So perlu dirakam percakapan dia, record his statement. And then the next could be people yang not directly involved with the offence, but something to do to facilitate the offence. For example, kata kalau contoh macam saya kata, somebody lodge a complaint that his money has been taken out from his account in the bank. So the bank officers are witnesses. So the bank officers will have to come forward and give their statements because they are familiar with the circumstances. Dalam case commercial, there will be commercial transaction. Witness handling those transactions has to come forward. There are so many other examples. people who are acquainted with the circumstances of the case, they need to come forward because they'll be witness. So who are these witnesses? These witnesses are people that are needed to prove the case, untuk membuktikan bahawa saksi ini, pengadu ada menyimpan, ada maintain account dalam bank ini, call the bank officer to prove that there's account belonging to this witness in this bank. Itu contoh dia. So these witnesses are needed to give evidence to prove the case. To show the commission of the offense, you need evidence. So this evidence come from witnesses. So these witnesses have to give their statements to the police. Now comes to the next part yang I think is quite important for you to understand. I think most of you already understand this, but I think I need to ensure that everybody is familiar with the background or the working of the system. Because we are going to talk a lot about evidence and statements. So when I'm talking about evidence and statement, I hope you can understand the difference between the two. When a witness comes forward being called by the police will record a statement from him. And the provisions for that is under section 112 of the CPC. Now we're going to talk about section 112. So section 112 is actually a section that provides for the recording of statements from witnesses. Now, these witnesses later on, if the case ends up in court, these witnesses will go to court and give evidence in court. So when in court, he'll be giving his evidence orally. Dia akan memberi keterangan kepada mahkamah tentang perkara-perkara yang dia saksikan. Tetapi sebelum itu, semasa siasatan polis, dia akan memberikan satu kenyataan kepada pihak polis yang mana kenyataan itu akan dirakamkan dalam borang yang dikhaskan dan akan digelarkan sebagai witness statement. A statement by the witness. Pernyataan saksi. So there is pernyataan saksi, there is keterangan di mahkamah. So perbezaan antara dua ini penting when we are going to discuss about impeachment procedures later on, which has something to do with the issues regarding statement to the police. So I'm going to talk today about section 112. So let's look at section 112 first under the CPC. So section 112 says that a police officer making a police investigation under this chapter may examine orally a person supposed to be acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case and shall reduce into writing any statement made by the person so examined. So, firstly, dia akan rakam percakapan dengan examine orally, tanya soalan secara lisan. And the person from whom the statement recorded, these are the person acquainted the facts and circumstances of the case, yang tahu mengenai case tu. The statement given by the person in answer to that question shall be reduced in writing. Akan dirakamkan, dituliskan. Reduce into writing any statement made by the person so examined. So apa orang tu cakap perlu dituliskan. That's wajib. Apa dia cakap dituliskan ataupun disebut di sini dirakamkan. And such person shall be bound to answer all questions relating to the question put to him by that officer. So diwajibkan kepada orang yang di-examine, ditanyakan soalan-soalan ini, yang sedang dirakamkan percakapan ini, to answer all questions, provided ada proviso dia. Provided that such person may refuse to answer any question, the answer to which will have a tendency to expose him to a criminal charge or penalty or forfeiture, kecuali jika jawapan itu boleh mendedahkan dia kepada pendakwaan, boleh mendedahkan bahawa dia telah melakukan satu jenayah yang membolehkan dia dituduh ataupun dihukum ataupun di forfeit. So kenapa ada this proviso? You see, saya ceritakan sedikit tentang background. Kenapa saya perlu ceritakan background how these provisions come about? Because you know the law doesn't exist in a vacuum. Kenapa wujud peraturan-peraturan ni? Because ada kejadian-kejadian atau perkara-perkara yang berlaku yang menyebabkan undang-undang ni diwujudkan. So you have to understand the circumstances how and where these provisions of the law operates. So kita semua tahu bahawa kita punya CPC ni was actually taken from the CPC in India. Zaman British dulu yang buat CPC. It was taken from CPC India, and the CPC in India was taken from the common law. In England itself, there is the law is not written down. There is no statute. Tak ada akta. Statute dia akta lah, akta yang dibuat oleh parlimen. So dia tak ada akta because dia punya law is from decision of the judges over the centuries, apa yang develop to become what we call common law. So bila datang ke India, it was codified, and then sampai ke Malaysia, it was codified. So one of the principle of common law is that the rule against self-incrimination, right against self-incrimination. Hak untuk seseorang itu tidak mensabitkan diri dia sendiri. This is something to do macam tidak boleh dipaksa mengaku lah. Tidak boleh. Dia mempunyai hak untuk tidak mendedahkan diri dia kepada pendakwaan ataupun how to put it. Tidak boleh, dia mempunyai hak untuk tidak mensabitkan diri sendiri, tidak menjadi saksi terhadap diri sendiri untuk mensabitkan diri sendiri. So ini termasuk pengakuan. Pengakuan ataupun confession adalah satu yang boleh mensabitkan diri seseorang. Jadi seorang itu tidak boleh dipaksa mengaku sebab dia mempunyai hak untuk tidak mensabitkan diri sendiri. I hope you understand what I'm trying to get about here, because I do not know what's the words to use to express the situation where a person tidak boleh dipaksa untuk mensabitkan diri sendiri. Dalam perkataan dosa zaman barbarian where you tangkap seorang lepas tu paksa dia mengaku, lepas tu hukum dia atas pengakuan itu, that cannot apply anymore lah. So dalam kes ini 112, seorang itu bila dirakamkan percakapannya, dia mesti menjawab semua soalan, tetapi apabila soalan itu jawapan itu boleh mendedahkan dia kepada prosecution, pendakwaan, dia not obliged to answer, dia boleh refuse to answer. Tetapi subsection 3 says that a person making a statement under this section shall be legally bound to state the truth. Dia mesti menyatakan yang benar, whether or not such statement is made wholly or partly in answer to a question. So bila ditanya soalan, dia mesti jawab, dan dia mesti jawab yang benar, yang betul. Dia boleh untuk tidak menjawab, wholly or partly in answer question. Dia boleh untuk tidak menjawab, untuk kalau jawapan itu boleh mendedahkan dia kepada pendakwaan. Tetapi kalau dia menjawab, dia mesti menyatakan yang benar. And then akhir sekali, a police officer examining a person under subsection 1 shall first inform that person of provision of subsection 2 and 3. So sebelum rakaman percakapan itu, sebelum statement dia diambil, sebelum dia di-examine and dirakamkan jawapan dia, that witness has to be informed, has to be told that he has to state the truth, but he need to answer if the answer will actually expose him to prosecution or forfeiture or penalty. So remember, there are a few important things in this section. Ada satu lagi, subsection 5. A statement made by any person under this section shall, whenever possible, ingat the word whenever possible, be taken down in writing and signed, by the person making it, or affixed with a thumbprint as the case may be, after it has been read to him in a language in which he made it, after he has been given an opportunity to make any corrections as he may wish. So remember all these 5 sections. Mula daripada bawah, dia mesti diberi peluang untuk make correction. After the statement has been taken, he must be read back to him and he must be allowed to make amendments kalau dia nak. read back to him in a language that he can understand. Maknanya mungkin ada interpreter digunakan. Yang memberi statement itu seorang yang bangsa Bangladeshi maybe, tak understand English or Malay, interpreter being used. Rakaman percakapan maybe bahasa Malaysia or the English, tapi dia bercakap dalam bahasa Bangladeshi maybe, so an interpreter has to be used. When it was read back to him, read also through the interpreter because in a language that he must understand. Make correction and he must sign on the statement. Ingat tadi it was statement taken in writing using a form. So sign, kalau tak pandai sign, thumbprint. And it has to be written down. Written down, sign or thumbprint whenever possible. The word whenever possible can be important in the cases we're going to discuss after this. So before that, he must have been told, been informed that yes, he's obliged to tell the truth, but he's not obliged to answer any question that can expose him to any criminal prosecution. So the examination must be done orally, but his answers been taken down in a writing. So this is what we call a witness statement, pernyataan saksi. Now pernyataan saksi is a pernyataan, rakaman pernyataan. The contents of it is evidence. Isi kandungan dia ada keterangan. Pernyataan dia adalah satu pernyataan, the physical pernyataan. Dia ada hardware, software kat situ. The hardware is the pernyataan. The contents, the software is the keterangan. So, di mahkamah. Katakanlah bila kes ini sampai di mahkamah. The case end up with prosecution in court. Okay, I go back to the same process. All these statements recorded by the police officer, by the investigating officer. I've already informed, satu investigating officer will be appointed. The investigating officer will be responsible in collecting all the evidence. The recording of all the statement punya witness will be compiled and put into a file, and that file we call an IP, investigating papers. So the investigating papers in a file, and it's a secret file, sulit. And this statement cannot be shown to anybody. It's for the consumption of the police and the investigation and the prosecution only. Not even the accused person has got the right to get a copy of this witness statement. The accused person, orang yang terhadapnya dibuat laporan lah. Now, inside the investigating papers will be the statements of all the witnesses, documents yang akan jadi keterangan, and photographs of barang case, and also reports by various experts. All the evidence that are needed to prove the case will compile investigation paper. So this investigation paper will be handed over by the investigating officer, by the police, to the DPP, who is acting on behalf of public prosecutor. The job of the DPP is to peruse through, to examine through, to read through the investigating papers to find out whether there are sufficient evidence to prove a case in court, whether to bring the case to court, whether to prefer a charge. Kalau dia berpendapat bahawa cukup keterangan untuk dapatkan sabitan, dan dia akan bagi arahan supaya orang yang terhadapnya disiasat itu dituduh di mahkamah. Kalau orang tu dalam riman, dalam tahanan, terus bawa mahkamah lah. So kalau orang itu bukan dalam tahanan, mungkin perlu ditangkap dulu sama ada with or without warrant untuk dibawa ke mahkamah untuk dituduh. But he made that decision based on the contents of the IP, which consists of exhibits and witness statements. And the contents of the witness statement are the evidence, keterangan. Bila sampai ke mahkamah, pertuduhan telah dibuat, the case was brought over to the court. When in court, the witness will give evidence orally. Dia akan dipanggil, summons to court, akan bagi keterangan orally. secara recite melalui examination in chief, cross examination dan sebagainya. Dan soalan yang dan the process, I'm sure you have seen how the court process been done. The officer conducting the prosecution, which is the DPP, will ask questions so that the witness answer. Those answers by that witness are the evidence. Sebab dia yang menjadi saksi yang menyaksikan kejadian itu, so apa yang diceritakan di mahkamah adalah keterangan. Apa yang dicerita di mahkamah itu adalah dipandu oleh soalan-soalan oleh Timbalan Penduduk Raya atau DPP. DPP ingin kemukakan keterangan bahawa kenderaan ini dipandu laju sebelum keterangan berlaku. So dia akan tanya soalan saksi ini, di mana awak berada pada masa itu? Saya berada di tempat ini. Ada tak saksikan apa kejadian? Ya, saya saksikan kejadian. Kejadian apa? Kemalangan. Sebelum kemalangan itu berlaku, awak nampak tak kenderaan yang terlibat ni? Ya, saya nampak. Bagaimana kenderaan itu? Saya nampak sebuah kenderaan Proton Saga warna hijau dipandu dengan laju. That's keterangan. Proton Saga dipandu hijau dengan laju itu adalah apa yang disaksikan. Itulah kejadian yang dia nak sampai kepada mahkamah. Itulah keterangan yang sekiranya mahkamah terima akan menjadi fakta. So DPP bertanya soalan ni based on what? Based on apa yang ada dalam pernyataan saksi dia. He's supposed to tell the court perkara yang sama dia beritahu polis dalam pernyataan saksi. So I hope you can understand the process here. So if there is anything that you need penerangan lanjut daripada saya, you are free to actually contact me directly, either WhatsApp, or nak call pun boleh, ataupun chat room. I prefer dalam WhatsApp atau chat room sebab soalan tu boleh dikongsikan bersama dengan rakan-rakan yang lain. So now itu adalah pernyataan saksi, dan untuk tujuan apa pernyataan saksi itu as provided for under section 112. Now kalau you tengok you punya textbook, banyak keadaan berlaku yang mana pernyataan saksi ini jadi isu di mahkamah. Sama ada yang saya sebut tadi, sama ada thumbprint ataupun tidak, ada tanda tangan atau tidak, dirakamkan ataupun tidak, sama ada dibacakan semula ataupun tidak, sama ada diberi peluang untuk buat pindaan ataupun tidak. Semua ini jadi isu di mahkamah. How does this statement yang bukan keterangan di mahkamah end up jadi keterangan di mahkamah? So before we go into the cases yang being discussed dalam you punya textbook ni, let me cerita dulu tentang dia punya background. Cerita dulu dia punya background. You see, selalunya saksi-saksi ni, bukan selalu, boleh timbul keadaan, terjadi keadaan di mana saksi-saksi ini di mahkamah menceritakan kepada mahkamah dalam menjawab soalan-soalan daripada sama ada pihak pendakwaan atau pihak pembelaan, menceritakan ataupun memberikan keterangan yang berlainan, yang berbeza daripada apa yang dinyatakan kepada pihak polis sebagaimana yang dirakamkan dalam percakapan saksinya. Okay. There are instances yang berlaku kejadian macam ini. Contoh, saya boleh bagi satu contoh umum dulu. Persons acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case can be family members, for example. Can be rakan sejenayah, for example. Can be orang yang sama bersalah, for example. For example macam ni lah. Katakanlah polis membuat serbuan narkotik ke atas sebuah rumah. Dalam rumah tu ada mak, ada anak. So bila dia ambil statement mak dia beri kenyataan, ya, kata dadah ini adalah beg yang berisi dadah ini adalah milik anak saya. Contoh. dia bagi statement pada polis macam tu, it was recorded, jadi penyataan saksi dia. And based on keterangan itu, pendakwaan pun membuat keputusan untuk mendakwa di mahkamah. Tapi bila dia datang mahkamah bagi keterangan di mahkamah, baru dia terfikir keterangan dia ni boleh menyebabkan anak dia kena gantung. So dia dah ada change of heart kat situ. So she might contradict her own evidence. Dalam mahkamah dia kata tak, beg itu bukan anak saya punya, ada orang datang tinggalkan beg tu kat rumah, for example. So dalam keadaan macam ni, what do the prosecution do? We'll go into apa yang dipanggil sebagai impeachment procedure. Okay. Satu lagi keadaan sama juga. Boleh jadi satu kejadian jenayah itu dilakukan oleh ramai orang, 4 orang for example. Tetapi yang benar-benar terlibat dan yang menyebabkan kematian mungkin 1 atau 2. Dia ada 1 or 2 was there, was involved, yes. But dia peranan, dia role in the whole incident may be minimal or less culpable. Jadi tukang sentry, tukang tengok ke, ataupun tak kira lah he was there but memainkan peranan yang kecil. These people may end up as witnesses. Kenapa? Because prosecution need them to strengthen their case. Tanpa keterangan lain, kadang-kadang tu ambil rakan-rakan sejenayah dia yang memainkan peranan yang kecil, jadikan dia saksi kepada pihak pendakwaan untuk beri keterangan tentang terhadap rakan-rakan dia yang lain tentang bagaimana kejadian itu berlaku. So contoh, I think one of it was in the case of Padmanabhan lah. Padmanabhan case is more famous as Susilawati punya case yang melibatkan jutawan kosmetik itu, Susilawati itu. I think there are about four persons was actually some of those involved were actually turned into prosecution witness. Sama juga contoh macam case against the former case Kevin Moraes. The former DPP was a colleague of mine yang dijumpai mayatnya dalam tong simen tu. So the perpetrators, some of them got charged, some of them become witnesses. So selalu berlaku bila sampai di mahkamah, dia pada pihak polis dia cerita lain, bila sampai mahkamah jadi saksi dia tukar cerita, because maybe dia nak protect rakan sejenayah dia ke whatsoever, we do not know lah dia punya intention, but dia bagi keterangan yang bercanggah. So bila timbul keadaan-keadaan macam ni, what do the prosecution do? So there is provisions under the law for impeachment. Kenapa kita buat impeachment? Sebab keterangan itu kalau ditinggalkan sebagai keterangan, dia akan go against the prosecution. Kita panggil seorang saksi pendakwaan tu jadi hostile. Dia memberi keterangan yang bertentangan, yang menunjukkan tertuduh, yang berpihak kepada pihak pembelaan. He's supposed to be a witness for the prosecution but give evidence in favor of the defense. He has become a hostile witness. We cannot leave his evidence just like that. It's going to spoil the case for the prosecution. What the prosecution can do is to expunge that part of the evidence, expunge that part of his evidence, and maybe rely on other evidence to prove his case. Pendakwaan mungkin ada banyak keterangan lain yang boleh membuktikan kesnya, tetapi adanya keterangan daripada hostile witness ni can spoil things up. So need to expunge. So untuk expunge, we use the provision is under section 132 of the Evidence Act. If I'm not mistaken, 132 or 145. I think section 145 of the Evidence Act provides for the impeachment of a witness by the party calling him, either by the defense or by the prosecution, because this can happen to both sides. A witness for the defense can also be hostile to the defense. A witness for the prosecution can be hostile for the prosecution. A witness for the defense suddenly give evidence in favor of the prosecution. A witness for the prosecution giving evidence in favor of the defense. And dalam case prosecution, selalunya witness before being called has already given a statement to the police which is recorded as a witness statement. So what section 145 allows for the impeachment of a witness if it can be shown that his evidence contradicts with a former statement. Oh, it's raining now, so mungkin ada sikit masalah dari segi audio sebab hari hujan. So I'm trying my best to actually to speak clearly. Tapi kadang-kadang tu I got carried away. You have to excuse me lah. So dalam keadaan yang mana section under the Evidence Act, section 145, if I'm not mistaken, provides for the impeachment of the witness who's hostile to the party calling him based on his former statements. So keadaan ini, bila seorang saksi itu jadi hostile kepada pihak pendakwaan, dia ada former statement, iaitu a statement recorded by the police, which is a 1-2 statement. So the prosecution will start an impeachment procedure. So impeachment procedure will be our topic, one of the topic that I'm going to cover, but not in this lecture. This is just the precursor, the background. Bila dengar this lecture, I think you will understand impeachment procedure better. So using the statement, it can be used to challenge that witness with the permission of the court. Before you start the impeachment procedure, you ask permission from the court, and you inform the court saying that we want to impeach this witness based on the former statement, which is the 112 statement. And then that statement will be produced to contradict the witness. And the court later on will have to make a decision whether the credibility of this witness is impeached or not. Bila kita impeach, yang dimaksudkan impeach, kita impeach credibility dia. Kita cabar keboleh percayaan dia. We have to prove that this witness is not reliable, not credible. We have to prove that this witness tidak boleh dipercayai. Macam mana caranya? Untuk menunjukkan bahawa dia telah memberi kenyataan yang bercanggah dalam penyataan yang terdahulu. Dan penyataan yang terdahulu itu adalah police statement. Statement yang telah diberikan kepada pihak polis. So now, under these circumstances, you can see that police statement being tendered into court becomes evidence. The police statement itself, the witness statement under 112, is evidence itself. Evidence in the impeachment procedure against that witness who has now turned hostile. Itu satu keadaan. Now, satu lagi keadaan, what follows after that? So, katakanlah witness itu telah di-impeach. Witness has already been impeached. Case goes on. The prosecution may win or may lose a case. Kalau ada keterangan-keterangan yang lain, dia mungkin masih boleh memenangi case dia. Still manage to prove the commission of the offence by the accused person based on other available evidence. But as far as that witness is concerned, his credibility has been impeached, is no longer reliable. Or the prosecution may lose their case, may not be able to prove their case because that witness is the only witness that he has. So, he may fail to prove their case. But what happened after that is that that witness who has been impeached can now be charged for another offence. And that offence is called an offence under section 193 of the Penal Code, which is perjury. Memberi keterangan palsu di mahkamah. So now, untuk membuktikan bahawa dia telah memberikan satu keterangan palsu, all the prosecution has to do under the section 193 under the Penal Code is just to show two contradictory statements. There is the contradictory statement made in court by calling the court clerk or registrar, produce the notes of evidence by the court, by the magistrate to show that he gave this evidence in court. And the other one is calling the police officer who record the statement to prove that he made this statement to the police. And these two statements and evidence in court are contradictory. So one must be false. Two contradictory evidence or statement cannot both be correct. So one must be false. It doesn't matter which one was false. That person can be found guilty for under section 193. So this is another circumstances where section 112 is being tendered, which is basically not evidence because it's just a statement to the police for the purpose of investigation, for the purpose of perusal by the DPP. But now that statement itself has become evidence in court. Why? Impeachment procedure and to prove to prove an offence under section 193, that is perjury giving false evidence. Two situations. Now there is a third situation where the 112 statement itself becomes evidence against the witness, evidence against the accused in the trial itself. This is exception to the rule against self-incrimination that I mentioned tadi. Yang mana statement 112 itu dikemukakan sebagai keterangan terhadap tertuduh itu sendiri dalam perbicaraan lain. Perbicaraan yang mana dia dituduhkan lah, sama ada bunuh ke, mengedar dadah ke, masuk ke statement 112 dia. So keadaan ini berlaku zaman dulu-dulu sebelum pindaan kepada section 113, because there are situation dulu-dulu this has something to do section 113 berkait dengan section 113. Now section 113 ni section apa pula? Tadi I ada beritahu, I've already told you about section 112, which is statement from witnesses. And then there is section 111, which is to compel the witness to come to court to give evidence. And then following investigation under section 1110. And then investigation under 108, 109, 108, what are the cases that police can directly investigate, mana yang RTM, mana yang perlu ada OTI. So it depends on direction of the DPP, it depends on whether seizable offence or non-seizable offence. I'm trying to get closer because it's quite noisy outside there because of the rain. Now, section 113 is actually statement taken from accused persons. Statement yang diambil daripada tertuduh sendiri, orang yang kena tangkap. Ingat situasi dalam section 110 saya tahu tu, dapat maklumat, terus pergi tempat kejadian, find out, berakhir dengan making inquiries, berakhir dengan membuat tangkapan. Orang itu ditangkap terus. Now, bila orang tu ditangkap, polis akan rakam percakapan tu, tapi percakapan itu bukan section bawah section 112 because that's against saksi. So now that section is section 113 daripada percakapan daripada orang yang kena tangkap. Pada masa dahulu ni maksud dia sebelum pindaan kepada section 113. Sebelum pindaan kepada section 113, pindaan section 113 is tahun berapa? 113 was amended by Act 1304. Act 1304 berkuat kuasa 2007. 2007. Before 2007, section 113 belum dipinda. Semasa belum dipinda, section 113 ni secara we are going to discuss section 113 later on lah. Ada tajuk khas untuk 113. But now I'm talking about section 112. Dia takut dengar bunyi petik. Kucing scared because of the thunderstorm. So now section 113 before pindaan, provision dia membolehkan, it allows statement by accused person to be tendered in evidence as evidence against him, exception to the rule against self-incrimination, tertakluk kepada dua syarat. Syarat dia adalah pertama, apabila orang itu kena tangkap, dia telah diberikan amaran, caution. Amaran tu maksud dia macam mana? Amaran tu mana dia diberitahu. Dia beritahu bahawa dia tidak diwajibkan untuk berkata apa-apa, tetapi jika dia berkata apa-apa sama ada menjawab kepada soalan ataupun tidak, boleh digunakan sebagai keterangan terhadap diri dia di mahkamah. He has been informed that he is not obliged to say anything, but whatever he says, whether in answer to a question or not, can be used as evidence against him. Bermakna orang yang kena tangkap tu sedar apa benda yang dia cakap ni boleh digunakan balik sebagai keterangan terhadap diri dia. Number one. This I think you have seen dalam wayang, dalam apa ke, bila orang kena tangkap, ada polis buat macam, you got the right to remain silent, anything you say against you can be used in the courts of law. Di Amerika tu dia ringkas sikit, di Malaysia ni tak tahu kenapa panjang sangat. Okey, itu yang pertama. Yang kedua adalah no inducement, threat or promise, maknanya that statement must be voluntarily made. Maknanya dia secara sukarela. Satu, dia sedar bahawa apa yang dia cakap ni boleh digunakan sebagai keterangan terhadap diri dia. Yang keduanya, dia membuatkan pernyataan itu secara sukarela tanpa apa-apa paksaan, dorongan dan janji. So memenuhi dua syarat ni, dia menyatakan sesuatu, apa yang dia cakap tu dirakamkan, apa yang dirakamkan boleh digunakan sebagai keterangan terhadap diri dia. Now, this is the old section 113 sebelum dipinda. Sekarang ni telah dipinda, semua statement by accused person cannot be used kecuali dalam beberapa keadaan lah untuk tujuan seperti menyokong keterangan dia, untuk menyokong keterangan dia, untuk dia impeach ke whatsoever. We'll go to section 113 later on dan kegunaan dia selepas pindaan dia. Namun begitu, di bawah undang-undang lain, other laws that have similar provision to section 113 has not been amended yet. So that provision is still valid, I think, in DDA, in SPRM Act, in SOSMA maybe, SOSMA, Dangerous Drug Act, SPRM punya Act. Masih ada lagi provision equivalent to section 113 where pernyataan oleh orang yang kena tuduh tertakluk kepada dua syarat tadi boleh digunakan sebagai keterangan terhadap diri dia as an exception to the rules against self-incrimination. Tapi di bawah CPC untuk general crime biasa, tak boleh digunakan pernyataan by an accused person as evidence against him. Okay, I hope you can follow me on that. Kalau tak boleh, you can always ask me directly because I find it quite difficult juga untuk bagi lecture online macam ni because I cannot gauge your reaction. So I cannot gauge you punya kefahaman. So I tak tahu where I patut stress or make a point so that you can understand. So you have to ask me directly lah. Selepas lecture ni, if there's anything that you want me to stress further. Kalau masa lecture, I can see your reaction, so I tahu kat mana nak stress. So now, with that background, apa kaitan dengan section 112 digunakan terhadap accused person? So keadaan ini boleh berlaku dalam mana apabila siasatan dibuat, tiada suspek lagi pada masa tu. Selalunya kes-kes yang bersifat macam komersial ke, scammer ke, ada laporan dibuat, tetapi tak ada siapa yang tahu dibuat. Tak ada siapa tahu buat. Contohnya macam saya bagi contoh, orang buat laporan polis bahawa duit dia daripada akaun bank telah dikeluarkan. Dia tak tahu siapa yang keluarkan, tapi dia buat laporan pada polis, duit daripada bank akaun dia telah dikeluarkan. And then polis pun buat siasatan. Buat siasatan, tiada suspek pada awalnya. Tapi setelah disiasat, barulah ada dituduh seseorang. Kan, selepas pergi ke bank, tengok CCTV, barulah tangkap seorang dan tuduh. Let's say orang yang dituduh itu sebelum itu telah pun dia ambil statement 112-nya. Ini boleh timbul contohlah, saya bagi example dalam ni. Orang tadi dia buat report kata ada orang ambil duit daripada akaun bank dia. It turns out seorang itu adalah family member yang tinggal satu rumah dengan dia. Family member ataupun orang dalam rumah dia lah. So polis dah ambil statement semua orang dalam rumah tu. And salah seorang daripada tu end up being orang yang kena tuduh selepas itu. So question is, boleh tak polis gunakan statement orang yang kena tuduh tadi, which is 112, as evidence against dia? So tertakluk kepada berperkataan boleh, dan salah satu daripadanya I think is kena check balik fakta dalam kes Yahya Rahman whether that was the situation. But actually it can be done. Orang itu digunakan statement 112 dia ke atas dia sebagai keterangan terhadap diri. Sepanjang saya jadi DPP, saya tak pernah lah buat macam itu because jarang timbul, tapi boleh berlaku. So now I've covered two situation and possible third situation where statement 112, which was not meant to be evidence in the first place, just a statement kepada pihak polis, untuk kegunaan pendakwaan dan siasatan now end up being evidence in court. So out of this trial, either impeachment ataupun charge under section 113 for perjury, issues regarding section 113 telah timbul. So what are those issues? Kita tengok kepada cases yang being quoted, referred to in the textbook lah. So what are those cases? Kita mula dengan case let's see those cases. Kita mula dengan cases seperti this is different topic. Okay, before I go into cases, allow me to actually mention satu, right? Takut terlupa ni later on. Kepuasan I sebut section 107 laporan polis, 108, 109, 1010, 111, 112 proses siasatan. Tetapi there is one section 107A. What is section 107A? Section 107A adalah satu section baru. It's a new section being inserted through Act 1204. Act 1204, if I'm not mistaken, is in the year of 2006. It provides that the complainant is the person making the report, can ask for a status report from the police. Dia dah buat report, dia boleh tanya status apa jadi dekat report dia. Status report, apa berlaku pada report dia kepada pihak polis. Dan pihak polis mesti memberi jawapan dalam masa seminggu tentang status, setakat mana siasatan ini telah dilakukan. I think you can read section 107. Dia perlu memberitahu kepada pihak polis, diwajibkan untuk memberitahu kepada pihak polis setakat mana siasatan itu telah dijalankan, apa telah berlaku. Dan sekiranya pihak polis gagal untuk memberikan update status tentang siasatan itu, pihak komplainan boleh mengadu ataupun request, buat permohonan request to the public prosecutor, and public prosecutor will direct the police yang conducting the investigation lah to prepare status report to be given to the complainant. Tetapi tidak ada hukuman diperuntukkan sekiranya polis gagal lah. Kalau polis minta status report, dia tak provide, DPP direct for status report pun dia tak provide, there is no punishment to the police officer concerned, but he may be subject to disciplinary action lah. So kenapa kena dimasukkan this particular section in the year of 2006, section 107A? Basically the background was that because those days, seorang itu bila dia pergi balai polis, dia lodge a report, lodge a complaint. If the police decide not to do anything, or the police did not do anything, just sit on it, not doing anything about it, there is nothing can be done. Selalu berlaku, bukan selalulah, boleh berlaku, pernah berlaku. It's not selalu berlaku. Somebody went to the balai police, lodge a report, and the police did not do anything about it, dan dia pun tak tahu apa berlaku dengan report dia. Dia report kata barang dia hilang ke, kereta dia kena curi ke, pecah rumah ke, lepas tu nothing happen. Dia pergi report kata orang tu curi barang dia, orang ni buat itu kat dia, orang ni pukul kat dia ke whatsoever, and then nothing happen. Report tu tinggal macam tu saja. So to overcome that, this section has been inserted. Now the investigators, the police has to provide for an update, status report, apa yang telah dilakukan to the complainant. Nah, so kalau tak buat, may be subject to disciplinary action lah, because ada ni section ni. So just so that you know, section 107A dan latar belakang dia. Now, cases regarding section 10112. Apa isu-isu yang dibangkitkan dalam kes ni? Let's look at the case of Section 112, any person acquainted with the facts of the case, termasuk juga OKT, orang kena tuduh. Dalam kes Subramaniam against PP 1956, Subramaniam against PP stated that examination or interrogation takes in the form of question and answers, but the recorded statement need not be that form. So apa maksud dia? So masa interview, polis tanya, witness jawab. Bila witness tu jawab, apa yang direkodkan, polis boleh rekod dalam bentuk naratif. Contoh macam ni, apa yang kamu nampak? Saya nampak sebuah kereta dipandu laju. So polis dia tak tulis apa kamu nampak kereta pandu laju. Dia boleh tulis kata saksi nampak sebuah kereta dipandu laju. Just dalam form naratif macam tu. Dibolehkan melalui kes Subramaniam. Dalam kes Abdullah Ambik, case concerning an offence perjury punishable under section 193, Muhammad Zaidin followed Subramaniam and ruled that recorded statements may not be taken in the form of question and answers. Kes Abdullah Ambik tahun 84. I think you know kes Abdullah Ambik kan? Kes Abdullah Ambik was a witness dalam case against Datuk Mohtar Hashim. Datuk Mohtar Hashim, I think you know, was a murder case, a charge against Datuk Mohtar Hashim. Datuk Mohtar Hashim now dah free lah, ada kat KL bebas, telah diampunkan. He was charged for murder for killing political rival. He was a minister, he was a wakil rakyat, ahli parlimen and minister. Dia shot dead his political rival, and semasa kejadian tu he was together with a few people who were his supporters then, and some of these people supporters ini later becomes witnesses. Statement 112 was taken. Tetapi semasa bicara, these people, termasuk Abdullah Ambik ni, dia beri keterangan yang berbeza, macam saya bagi tadi lah, berbeza daripada apa yang telah diberitahu pada polis. So because of that, they were charged under section 193. So apabila dituduh di bawah section 193, ni yang timbul isu ni. Ni yang saya nak cerita ni. Apabila di-charge di bawah section 193, evidence dikemukakan adalah the statement under section 112 itself to prove that he has given a different contradiction against what he has said in court in the trial proper. Dalam kes Abdullah Ambik ni, trial melibatkan Datuk Mohtar Hashim, dia cakap lain, statement pada polis dia cakap lain. Now that statement will be tendered against him in the trial against him under section 193 to prove that he has given a contradictory statement or evidence. So the court has to be satisfied that the recording of the statement under section 112 are according to law. The recording of statement according to the provisions of the law satisfies all the conditions required for it to be a statement under section 112. So one of it is must be in writing. Tapi court dah kata writing tu tak semestinya writing question and answer. It can be in narrative form. Seterusnya isu dibangkitkan dalam kes Ghani Yusof. Ghani Yusof ni pula, apa berlaku? Ghani Yusof ni case of couple homicide 304. I'm not very familiar with the facts of the case. You have to do your own research. Go into you punya CLJ or MLJ whatsoever. Find out about the facts of case Ghani Yusof ni, macam mana case Ghani Yusof ni 112 statement tu boleh jadi isu, sedangkan charge ni adalah case of under Penal Code 304. It could be a situation yang ketiga yang saya beritahu awal tadi, 3 situation tadi where 112 can become relevant as evidence. So dalam case ni, apa berlaku adalah signature thumbprint. Tak ada. Section 112 kata must be given signature and thumbprint atau thumbprint, signature atau thumbprint. Tetapi court kata the wording in section 125 kata whenever possible. Whenever possible perlu ada mesti ada signature thumbprint. So dia bagi meaning to the term, to the phrase whenever possible. Whenever possible ni mana bila menasabah untuk berbuat demikian lah, tapi timbul keadaan is not possible untuk write down, bagi signature, bagi thumbprint. Saya bagi contoh keadaan. Apabila polis sampai, terus macam dalam section 110 tadi dapat report, pergi tempat kejadian, buat inquiry. Semasa buat inquiry itu adalah seorang saksi, katalah seorang saksi itu buat satu statement, buat satu pernyataan. Dia yang bunuh atau dia yang curi, dia yang pukul. Tak sempat lah polis pada masa tu nak buat macam cerita komedi selalu kita tengok dalam wayang Piramli tu. Oh, tunggu sekejap. Saya nak tulis. Dia pun ambil kertas, ambil pen, lepas tu ditulis. Siapakah yang pencuri? Siapa tadi mencuri? Siapa yang mencuri? Oh, dia tadi. Oh, dia tu mencuri. Dialah yang mencuri. Tak sempat lah nak buat macam tu. So, the moment kata dia mencuri, polis terus pergi tangkap. So, bila that witness kata dia mencuri, statement dia yang mencuri tu, does that memenuhi kehendak 1125? It was not taken down in writing. No statement. No tu. Tetapi 125 kata whenever possible. So dalam keadaan tu is not possible. Tetapi dalam kes Gani Yusof ni pula, court kata dia mesti ada reason. Court kata mesti ada reason. Dalam kes yang contoh yang saya bagi tadi, it's not possible. So what's not possible? Sebab reasonable lah. Dia berada tempat kejadian, pencuri sedang melarikan diri, saksi tunjukkan pada pencurinya. Kalau nak ambil statement dulu, tak sempat lah nak pergi tangkap pencuri tu. That is an explanation there. Tapi dalam kes Gani Yusof ni, court kata, since no adequate reason and indeed no reason whatsoever has been advanced for the failure to obtain the signature or thumbprint of the accused on the respective statement, I hold that both are not admissible in evidence. Tiada sebab diberikan kenapa tak boleh dapat tanda tangan orang tu. So dalam keadaan macam tu, tak boleh diterima lah. Because syarat 112 tak dipenuhi. That means that 112 statement tu tidak boleh dikemukakan sebagai keterangan for whatever purpose it is. Kemudian dalam kes Jaya Rahman, I think situasi yang sama dengan kes Abang Gani Yusof. I think you all know kan kes Jaya Rahman kan, quite famous case ni, banyak kali di quoted. Just in case kalau you tak tahulah, saya cerita sikit lah the background of kes Jaya Rahman. In case any of you do not know the facts of Jaya Rahman. Kes Jaya Rahman ni berlaku dalam tahun 82. So awal 80-an dulu, ujung 70-an, awal 80-an adalah timbulnya ataupun bermula apa yang was referred to as gerakan dakwah pada masa dulu. All this gerakan-gerakan dakwah was brought about by revolusi Iran. Kalau you baca 1978, 1979 berlaku revolusi Iran di Iran. So bila berlaku revolusi Iran itu, semangat keislaman sangat tinggi di kalangan dunia Islam. Timbullah kumpulan-kumpulan atau gerakan-gerakan dakwah yang sangat tinggi semangat keagamaan dia, tetapi harap semangat je lah yang lebih, tapi knowledge ataupun ilmu tu kurang. Semangat tinggi, ilmu kurang. So what happened? Macam kes Jaya Rahman. So apa berlaku dalam kes Jaya Rahman ni? A group of people yang begitu bersemangat ingin mencontohi Nabi Ibrahim. Nabi Ibrahim telah memecahkan berhala-berhala sebagai tidak bersetujulah untuk mencegah syirik dan memecahkan berhala. Semua orang tahu cerita tu kan. So mereka ingin melakukan perkara yang sama. So daripada Kuala Lumpur mereka berjalan ke utara. Masa dulu highway tak ada, so ikut Rawang, ikut Sungai Buloh, Rawang, Selayang, Sungai Buloh, Rawang. Jalan lama pergi utara. Dan sepanjang jalan di mana mereka berjumpa dengan kuil, mereka akan berhenti dan pecahkan berhala. So mereka lakukan pada malam hari. Tetapi bila dia dah pecahkan satu atau dua berhala, dia telah diketahui oleh penganut-penganut Hindu. Penganut Hindu ni mula call antara satu sama lain. So belah atas-atas tu ada penganut Hindu yang telah berkawal di kuil masing-masing, sebab telah dapat berita ada orang memecahkan berhala. Sedangkan kumpulan ini tak mengetahui bahawa ada kuil yang telah dikawal. Mereka terus singgah di Kerling, tempat bernama Kerling, singgah di kuil Kerling dan memecahkan berhala di situ tanpa menyedari ada orang mengawal dekat situ. Dan akibatnya mereka telah dipukul dan ada yang telah meninggal dunia. So yang memukul mereka tu 8 orang telah dituduh itulah Jaya Rahman dan sebagainya. Dan salah satu isu, ada banyak isu dalam kes ni. Salah satu daripada isu ni adalah tentang 112 statement lah, boleh bawa masuk ke tidak. 112 statement atas salah seorang daripada yang kemudiannya menjadi tertuduh. Sebab pada masa tu, contoh keadaan ini adalah macam mana yang saya beritahu awal lagi, pada mula polis asat, polis tak tahu siapa yang memukul menyebab kematian ni. Sedangkan orang ramai pada masa tu ambil statement semua orang. Lepas tu timbul ada beberapa orang yang telah ambil statement tu, later on becomes the accused person. So boleh tak digunakan dia punya statement tu as keterangan terhadap diri dia, sebab pada masa itu section 113 membenarkan tertakluk kepada dua syarat tadi lah. So salah satu syaratnya kalau dia telah ditangkap. So dalam isu ni sama ada dia telah ditangkap ataupun belum, isu voluntarily dan sebagainya. Tetapi itu isu lain. Tapi apa yang penting adalah keputusan dalam kes ini yang menyatakan, in our judgment, such a statement is admissible because the words whenever possible in subsection 112. Again, makna whenever possible. With respect to Wan Sulaiman FJ and Ghani bin Yusof, sebab dia berbeza sikit dengan Ghani bin Yusof dalam kes ni. In our view, those words govern not only the words signed by the person making or affixed with the thumbprint as the case may be, but also words immediately preceding them, namely be taken down in writing. So perkataan sign, affixed, thumbprint adalah berturutan daripada taken down in writing. So statement 112 walaupun not taken down in writing, ada sebab because it was not possible at that time, masih boleh diterima sebagai keterangan di bawah section 112 kalau mengikut kes Jaya Rahman. Tetapi of course lah, ini bukannya satu yang definite lah, sebab lain kes, lain decision dia. Page switching opine that the phrase whenever possible in section 112 CPC ought to mean whenever reasonably possible. Oh, reasonably possible. Itu pula interpretation dia. So, tapi you fahamlah isu dia. Yang penting you faham isu. Syarat mesti bertulis, tanda tangan dan sebagainya. Tetapi 175 kata whenever possible. So, kalau dia not possible to do that, walaupun syarat tak dipenuhi, masih boleh diterima sekiranya 112 itu nak digunakan sebagai keterangan dalam keadaan-keadaan kes yang saya sebutkan tadi. Kenapa saya stresskan keadaan-keadaan kes yang boleh sebutkan? Because I do not want you to be under the impression that 112 tu bila-bila masa je boleh dikemukakan sebagai keterangan. No. 112 cuma boleh dikemukakan sebagai keterangan only under keadaan yang telah saya sebutkan tadi. Because 112 is a statement. Bezakan statement dengan keterangan di mahkamah. This is a statement to the police. Keterangan di mahkamah adalah oral evidence yang diberikan semasa examination in chief. So I hope you understand that. Now the next case is case Pak Manaden lah, case Susilawati. Case Pak Manaden ni, yes, salah seorang daripada yang terlibat tu SP 59 menjadi saksi. And I think isu kat sini, if I'm not mistaken, adalah berkaitan dengan impeachment. Dia dah jadi saksi, dia tidak dituduh jadi saksi, tetapi bila jadi saksi dia jadi hostile. So dia nak kena impeach. Bila nak impeach, pendakwaan nak kemukakan dia punya pernyataan di bawah section 112 as proof of a witness statement that contradicts his evidence in court. So apa mahkamah kata? The judge in the High Court held that the statement recorded from section SP 59 is ruled inadmissible as he was not convinced that the statement was read back to the witness after it was recorded. Dia tak yakin bahawa statement itu telah dibacakan semula. Statement dibacakan semula adalah requirement yang diperuntukkan di bawah section 112 115. Ya, 1125. So bila tak menurut 1125, that means tak cukup syarat. Tak cukup syarat is not 112 statement, not 112 statement, not admissible as evidence against that witness. In the case against that witness, sama ada impeachment ataupun 193, giving false evidence atau perjury. Okey, dalam kes Tamil Selvam against Maniam, kes 2012. Suspect in all this case I denied giving statement under section 112 of the CPC, and I said that I was told by the police surgeon to sign the statement that was already prepared without allowing him to read it. And that was already prepared long period. After hearing submissions by both parties, the court was satisfied that the statement did not comply with the condition under section 112 as follows. So, keadaan dalam kes ini adalah biasa diketemui dalam banyak juga kes lain. Saya bagi contoh lah. Contoh keadaan dalam kes Tamir Silva. Ingat contoh awal saya beritahu tadi? Sama ada ahli keluarga ataupun rakan sejenayah ataupun sesiapa saja yang diambil statementnya, diambil statement as a witness, was recorded a witness statement from him, and he later on become a witness against the accused person, and that accused person, either his friend, his family members, or someone near to him, and for some reason known to him, that witness decided to change his testimony, no longer saying the same thing as in the witness statement given to the police. Now in court, he tells a different story which contradicts this other. So now the prosecution wants to tender the witness statement taken under section 112, either to contradict him in impeachment procedure, to impeach him, as to declare him as a hostile witness and to impeach him, or if he has been successfully impeached, to use it as evidence in the trial against him under section 193. So this witness now has become an accused person, will become the defense and will argue against that statement. So he will say things like, as in the case Tamir Selvam, dia kata he did not give that statement. That statement was already pre-prepared. He was just shown to him and asked to sign. He didn't even get to read it. Dia dikatakan macam statement tu lah disediakan, dia cuma disuruh sign, dia tak tahu apa ada dalam statement tu. That was the reason kenapa dia nak membantah, membela diri dia, sama ada dalam impeachment ataupun dalam trial against a jury. Mungkin juga seorang itu akan berkata dalam satu contoh lagi kes nanti, dia akan kata bahawa dia telah dipaksa untuk bercakap demikian. Ataupun mungkin dia berkata dia tak cakap macam itu, dia cakap lain tapi ditulis lain. That the witness now who is the accused person defending himself against the prosecution who wants to prove that statement that he makes against himself. So you faham tak dia punya situasi tu? So dalam keadaan itulah timbul kes Tamir Selvam ni. Dan dalam Tamir Selvam ni, inilah alasan-alasan kenapa Mahkamah menolak statement 112 itu daripada dikemukakan sebagai keterangan terhadap saksi. So, one, statement under 112 did not indicate whether recording officer has spoken with Jayakumar who ensure the language used. Pegawai perakam tak beritahu mahkamah dia ada bercakap dengan saksi itu untuk memastikan dia faham atau tidak bahasa yang digunakan. You see, lagi sekali saya nak ceritakan background before we go into this issue. Saya nak ceritakan background. Macam saya cakap awal tadi, how the law operates. The law operates not in a vacuum. Ada keadaan dan sebab yang mewujudkan circumstances where this laws comes to be atau comes into being. So, sambung daripada keadaan yang saya cakap tadi. Apabila witness di-impeach atau witness dituduh di bawah section 193, macam saya beritahu awal tadi, he will defend himself. He is now the accused person, he will defend himself. Dia akan bangkitkan isu-isu seperti saya tak faham apa yang saya tak cakap macam tu, contoh. Ataupun dia akan bangkitkan isu saya tak faham bahasa yang digunakan. Ataupun dia akan bangkitkan isu statement itu telah disediakan, saya cuma disuruh sign. Now, bila dia bangkitkan isu-isu macam gini, now it's up to the prosecution to prove that statements against the witness. So how the prosecution prove that witness against the statement? Prosecution akan panggil saksi dia lah. Siapa saksi dia? Pegawai perakam yang pertamanya. Pegawai yang merakamkan, the officer who record that statement. So the officer who record the statement will come to court and give evidence to show that he has complied with all the requirement under section 112. Saya telah buat itu, saya telah buat ini, saya bacakan, saya beritahu dia ini, saya bacakan itu, saya bacakan ini, saya pastikan dia faham bahasa, saya gunakan interpreter, saya bagi peluang dia untuk tanda tangan, saya bagi peluang dia baca semula. All these things will be the evidence of the pegawai perakam. Dan kalau ada interpreter, interpreter juga dibawa. Kalau ada pengawal, whoever in the room, dia punya akan dibawa to help bolster up the case of the prosecution. So ini akan jadi argument dia. Pendakwaan akan buktikan bahawa statement ini taken through their witnesses, their recording officer dan sebagainya, that all the conditions under section 112, 125 are satisfied with. The defense will try through the defense himself, through that witness himself, to say that this have not been satisfied. So the court will make a finding. So dalam kes Tamir Selvam ni, selepas mendengar kedua-dua pihak argue, this is a finding of the court. The court found that the statement under 112 did not indicate whether the recording officer spoken with Tayakuma to ensure that the language used. Pegawai perakam tu tak bercakap sendiri dengan Tayakuma tu untuk pastikan saksi faham ke tidak. Ini Tayakuma ni must be the witness yang dia nak impeach ke whatsoever lah. There was no evidence which ensured that precondition section 1124 had been described and understood by the suspect. Dia faham ke peruntukan section 124 that he has to tell the truth and he is not obliged to answer question that tend to expose him to prosecution. Dia faham tak peruntukannya? It was not proven by the prosecution dalam kes ni. So kalau not proven, statement tu tak boleh nak dibawa masuk sebagai keterangan terhadap saksi itu, sama ada for impeachment ataupun for section 193. Statement 112 clearly there was no statement written by Tayakuma that given an opportunity to make correction. Tiada peluang diberi untuk buat pembetulan. Recording officer was also investigating officer of the accused in this case as well as Tayakuma. The IO of the case yang investigate Tamir Selvam, the accused case ni, adalah juga yang merakamkan percakapan saksi. So Tayakuma ni must be in the process for impeachment lah ni. Dia adalah saksi terhadap Tamir Selvam, tapi dia sudah berpaling tadah, turn hostile. So sekarang dia nak impeach. So bila nak impeach, kena prove the 112 statement. So prosecution tried to prove the 112 statement, but this is what the court found out. There was no signature of recording officer. Tambah satu lagi syarat, signature of the recording officer, even though it was not there dalam 125. Statement was taken down almost 3 months after suspected was arrested. 3 bulan lepas accused kena tangkap, baru ambil statement daripada saksi ni. Statement under 112 CPC had been a failure to ensure precondition under section 112 CPC was observed. Dalam lain perkataan, precondition, syarat-syarat awal section 112 telah tidak dipenuhi, maka statement itu tidak boleh diterima masuk, tidak boleh digunakan untuk impeach Tayakuma yang telah berpaling tadah kepada pihak pendakwaan semasa menjadi saksi terhadap Tamir Selvam. So, kes pendakwaan macam, keadaan di mana pendakwaan saksinya sendiri yang turn hostile. Jadi dalam kes pendakwaan sendiri ada evidence yang memihak kepada pihak pembelaan. So, there's no way pihak pendakwaan boleh menang lah. Itu keadaannya. Now, satu lagi kes adalah Noliana Sulaiman, page 171 of the textbook, which is in the year of 2001. Keadaan ini adalah keadaan dalam yang saya sebut tadi. The accused was convicted by the session court for perjury under section 193 Penal Code when the statement 112 contradicted oral evidence in court. So ini keadaan yang macam saya dah explain lebih awal tadi. Ada seseorang dituduh di mahkamah, this Noliana dia jadi saksi, tapi bila jadi saksi dia turn jadi hostile. Tahu turn macam tu. Dia jadi hostile. Dia bagi keterangan tidak berpihak pada pihak pendakwaan, sedangkan sebelum itu dia telah memberikan satu percakapan kepada polis yang menyokong kes pihak pendakwaan. So akibatnya dia telah contradict herself, statement pada polis lain, keterangan mahkamah lain, dan akibat daripada itu dia telah didakwa di bawah section 193 for giving false evidence ataupun perjury, memberi keterangan palsu. So semasa didakwa di bawah keterangan palsu, dia membangkitkan isu berkaitan dengan voluntariness. She appealed on the ground inter alia that Section 112 should not have been admissible as it was involuntarily. So ingat tak sebelum ni saya ada cakap tentang Section 113. 113 sebelum satu pernyataan bahawa Section 113 digunakan terhadap orang kena tuduh itu sendiri, that statement be used against him as evidence against him, mesti dibuktikan bahawa ia adalah dibuat secara voluntarily, sukarela. So dalam kes 112, Augustine Paul held that Section 112 read with Section 114 means that Section 112 must be made voluntarily and the burden is on the accused to show they was not made voluntarily. Maknanya, ya, mahkamah setuju. Section 112 pun mesti dibuat secara sukarela, tak boleh paksa. Tetapi beban untuk membuktikan bahawanya ia tidak dibuat secara sukarela adalah pada pihak pembelaan. So kalau you nak kata, I did not make that statement, saya dipaksa untuk buat kenyataan tu, saya tak cakap pun macam tu, tapi polis paksa saya untuk cakap dan sebagainya, untuk membuktikan kepada mahkamah bahawa kamu telah buat kenyataan itu secara tukar, secara tidak sukarela, adalah terletak kepada the accused himself. It's not for the prosecution to prove that he made this statement voluntarily. So you faham tak? Dalam Section 113, dalam Section 113 yang lama, is the prosecution who has to prove to court that this statement was made voluntarily. Sebab 113 ada statement, ada condition that it must be made without any inducement, threat or promise before it can be admitted into evidence. So the burden is on the prosecution to actually prove that this statement was made voluntarily before that statement can be used as evidence. Tapi tak ada syarat tu dalam 112. Tak ada syarat dalam 112. Bukan bermakna bahawa statement yang diambil secara paksa pun boleh diterima masuk. Tak. Because tiada siapa pun boleh dipaksa untuk menyatakan sesuatu yang dia tak nak nyatakan. Tetapi ianya bukan syarat yang pihak pendakwaan perlu buktikan. So kalau nak buktikan ianya dibuat secara tidak sukarela, terletak kepada pembelaan. Okay, I hope you understand that. You're following me on that. Kalau tak faham, you can always contact me. Now the next case is Yusuf bin Umar. This is something to do with 113 juga, sebab ada disebut situ tentang Boy Dyer, trial within a trial. So awal tadi saya dah sebut tentang Section 113, statement taken from accused person, takluk kepada beberapa syarat sebelum boleh diterima sebagai keterangan. Mesti dibuktikan dia telah ditangkap. Pernyataan diberikan kepada pegawai yang berpangkat inspector and above. Pernyataan dibuat tanpa sebarang paksaan, dorongan atau janji. Dia telah beri amaran bahawa dia tahu, supaya dia tahu bahawa apa-apa yang dia kata boleh digunakan sebagai keterangan terhadap dia di mahkamah. Dan itu antaranya lah, banyak lagi lah yang case law ada bagi. Itu 113. So apabila pihak pendakwaan perlu buktikan perkara ini, pihak pembelaan akan membantahlah, menafikan. Dia akan mengatakan bahawa tak, statement ini tidak boleh diterima sebagai keterangan sebab dia telah dibuat dengan paksaan. Dia telah dibuat setelah diberikan janji. Dia tidak faham tentang, tidak diberikan amaran. Kalau bagi amaran pun dia tidak memahami apa maksud amaran itu. Dia telah diambil oleh seorang pegawai yang bukan pangkat inspektor. So is the opposite. So macam mana mahkamah nak menentukan sama ada keterangan ini boleh diterima ataupun tidak terima? Dia perlu dengar keterangan. Dengar keterangan daripada pendakwaan dan pembelaan atas isu sama ada keterangan ini boleh diterima ataupun tidak, on the issue of admissibility, for the court to determine whether this statement under Section 113 is admissible or not as evidence in court. Court has to listen to evidence from both sides, and after listening to the evidence, court then decide whether it was admissible or not admissible. So the prosecution will have to call their witnesses. Who are their witnesses? Pegawai perakam, pegawai penjaga, interpreter. And these people will give evidence to show that dia faham interpreter will say, saya translate kepada dia, dia faham apa yang dikata oleh pegawai. Pegawai will give evidence saying that saya tidak memeriksa badan dia, dia sihat walafiat, tak ada kecederaan. Saya tanya dia sama ada dia sukarela, dia kata dia sukarela, baru saya lakap cakapan. All these are for the purpose of showing voluntariness dan sebagainya. Now, defense of course will call dia punya defense witness lah, which is usually he himself lah, sebab unless kalau dia ada saksi lain, contohnya doktor, dia boleh panggil doktor, doktor kata, oh ya memang betul ada kesan kena pukul pada badan dia. And then the court will actually make a decision whether to admit or not to admit that statement. So this process will go through satu yang dipanggil voir dire, trial within a trial. There is the trial proper. The trial proper untuk menentukan sama tertuduh bersalah seperti pertuduhan ataupun tidak. And then dalam trial proper tu, there is a trial within the trial just untuk menentukan whether this piece of evidence is admissible or not. So, you faham now what is a trial within a trial? So now, on the issue of Section 112, tadi dalam kes Nurliana, telah diputuskan bahawa voluntariness juga adalah satu isu. Nampak? Perlu dibuktikan, not dibuktikan oleh pihak pendakwaan, tapi perlu adalah satu-satu syarat. Perlu juga ditentukan bahawa statement was voluntarily made. Bukan pendakwaan yang membuktikan, tapi sebaliknya kalau it was not voluntarily made, then it was for the defense to actually raise the issue. Kalau defense raise the issue, then barulah pendakwaan akan buktikan bahawa, in response akan buktikan bahawa it was voluntarily made. Isu dia, untuk menentukan voluntarily made ataupun tidak, this statement perlu kepada satu trial within a trial macam dalam kes Section 113 tadi. So this is what the court says lah. Saya bacakan secara ringkas sajalah. The Court of Appeal, kan, the appellant was convicted by the trial court for giving false evidence, Section 193 Penal Code, and the High Court dismissed his appeal. Faham kan? Sama macam kes Nurliana, sama macam kes sebelumnya. This is a case of 193. Dalam tema silvam tu, dalam impeachment procedure. She appealed on the ground He then appealed to the Court of Appeal, claiming inter alia that a trial within trial was not held to prove the voluntariness of the appellant statement made under Section 112. Ni saya kata dia kena perlu buktikan voluntariness. And untuk perlukan buktikan voluntariness, we must have a trial within a trial. But the court says the Court of Appeal held that the accused can still raise the issue of voluntariness in his defense, though the court had already stated the voluntariness of Section 112 is not to be determined in voir dire trial within a trial. You boleh baca reasoning court dalam apa ni yang diterangkan di situ. Tapi saya simpulkan macam ni sajalah. You read yourself what court means. Submission under Section 112 bla bla was not applicable. Dia kata basically dalam ground yang court bagi tu tak boleh bandingkan 113 dengan 112 sebab syarat-syarat dia berlainan. Tapi yang bagi saya yang interesting apabila court kata the Court of Appeal held that the accused can still raise the issue of voluntariness of his defense though the court had already stated that voluntariness is of Section 112 is not to be determined in a voir dire trial within the trial. Sebelum tu, the Court of Appeal dismiss. Basically macam ni apa maksud sini. Mahkamah rayuan kata, yes, voluntariness is an issue. Tapi ia boleh dipertimbangkan, dibuktikan sama ada voluntary, tak ada voluntary dalam trial itu sendiri. Tak perlu kepada trial within the trial. Tak perlu kepada voir dire. Because that issue is the issue in that main trial itself. It can be raised during the defense. Nampak tak bezanya dengan keadaan 113? 113, isu dia lain. Isu dia maybe murder, case 39B. Case is set. So, isu dalam case main trial tu adalah admissibility of statement. So, trial within the trial diadakan to determine the admissibility of statement. That statement is just one piece of evidence in the main trial proper, which is the trial for murder ke, for 39B ke, for kidnapping ke, it doesn't matter. The main trial is something else. Now, this voir dire trial within a trial is just to determine the issue of admissibility of this piece of evidence. That's why we have a trial within a trial. Tetapi dalam kes 193, dalam kes Yusof Umar 193 ni, that 112 statement is a piece of evidence in the trial proper, in the main trial. Isu dia adalah boleh ke tak boleh terima keterangan ini sebagai keterangan terhadap pertuduhan terhadap dia di bawah Section 193. That piece of evidence tu is the issue dalam main trial, not trial within a trial. And because it's an issue dalam main trial, dia boleh dibangkitkan masa defense. You can defend itself by saying, I did not make that statement. Or that statement was made by me not voluntarily. Because that's the case against you. The case against you is making a false statement. So you can deny making that false statement. You boleh kata statement tu not made voluntarily. It's up to you, whatever your defense is. But that issue is the issue in the main trial. Berlainan dengan 113, trial within a trial, because the issue is concerning the admissibility of a piece of evidence. Nampak tak beza dia kat situ? So in short, kalau ikut Yusof bin Umar ni, yes, voluntariness is an issue. Sebagaimana dalam kes Nuliana Sulaiman tu, yes, is an issue. Kena buktikan juga bahawa dia dibuat secara voluntarily. Sekiranya dibangkitkan isu dia dibuat secara tidak voluntarily, tetapi isu itu tidak memerlukan satu trial within a trial. So I hope you understand, you can follow what I'm saying. You boleh follow kat sini. It's not necessary for prosecution to prove their voluntariness Section 112 before such statement may be admitted in evidence in court. That statement can be admitted, and that statement is evidence in the main trial itself. Okay, I hope you all can follow what I'm saying. What I'm saying in this case. So I think that's all I want to talk about concerning Section 112, Section 111, Section 110, Section 109, 108, as continuation from Section 107, which is about police report information to the police. So the next topic I'm going to go about is 113, 114, 116, and 117. I'm breaking up. We are still under the topic of police investigation. This is under the bigger topic of police investigation, but I'm breaking up bit by bit because I'm afraid I do not want you to be, you know, under too much information to process. If there's too much information to process, you might not be able to follow and understand. So I'm going to be bit by bit. And if it's necessary, I may break up this lecture. Instead of going 2 hours, I may break up into 1 hour and 1 hour. So cutting it bit by bit so that it's easier for you to digest, to avoid situation that too much information for you to process in one session. But if I break up it bit by bit, we have to have more often. The lecture have to be twice a week at least, because we don't have that many weeks before your exam. We have only about 8 weeks now. So 10 weeks, we already passed 2 weeks, so there's another 8 weeks for me to cover all the topic. So I'm breaking up the topic bit by bit, and we don't have any tutorials. Usually, if you can notice what I did before this, I talk generally about the topic during the lecture and then discuss in detail and even discuss the cases during tutorials. But now there are no tutorial, but I'm replacing the tutorial with assignments. So these assignments actually are regarding cases. I just want you to read up the cases. So I will pose a questions that will require you to just read up cases and just regurgitate the answer. Just read up and keluarkan balik the answer from the cases that you read. So I'm giving you some cases to read, but not this week because you still got one assignment from last week. So next week I'm going to give you an assignment as a replacement for your tutorials, and that assignment will require you to read up some cases. That's all. So it's not going to be a long one, it's just a short one. So because I got no time to go into detail into the cases, I'm just going on general topic as what I'm doing now. So again, if you have any question, you feel free, can contact me directly. And the next topic we're going to talk about, there are two important things inside there. First, there is 113, which I will touch a little bit on 113 here now, so just to continue on 113, and then the next big topic is 117. 117 is regarding remand. When the police arrested somebody, while investigating, while doing all these things that I'm telling you, taking down statement, investigating, money, what do they do with the person arrested? Kalau that person is not arrested, it's okay, they'll be put on police bail whatsoever. But if that person was arrested, where do you keep that person? And what about that person's personal liberty that cannot be deprived unless there are provisions of the law? What are the laws that provide for the person to be remanded, be taken away their liberty, and who can make the order? That would be a remand under section 117. That's one important topic, and of course the other one is section 113, which I will talk about a little bit. And then there's also section 116, which is a continuation of section 111. Okay, we'll talk about that in my next lecture, going to be next week, and I will see whether I will break it up into 2 lectures or 1 lecture as like just now. So I'll be in touch. Just keep in touch through the WhatsApp group, and I need your help, the class monitor especially. Please ensure that this video reach every one of you in the class, and make sure everybody is a group, either WhatsApp or the Teams in the Microsoft Teams. Okay, I think that is all for now. Thank you so much. Any question, you can contact me directly. And I finish this off with Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.